Jared Lawson had worked hard to build his company from the ground up. From its humble beginnings, his retail chain had grown into a well-known brand, with stores across the country. Jared always prided himself on running a business that valued fairness, equality, and respect for all customers and employees. But as the company expanded, so did the whispers. Rumors began to spread that some employees were not treating all customers equally. Jared wasn't sure how true these rumors were, but they troubled him. How could something like that be happening under his watch? Jared knew he had to find out for himself. So, he made a bold decision. He would go undercover in one of his own stores. He wasn't interested in hiring a third-party investigator or relying on anonymous complaints. Jared wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. To make sure no one recognized him, Jared disguised himself. He wore a baseball cap, dark sunglasses, and casual clothes, nothing too fancy, just like a regular customer. He wanted to blend in and avoid any special treatment. With his disguise complete, Jared set off to the store, his mind racing with a mix of excitement and nervousness. What would he find? Would his employees be as loyal to his company's values as he thought, or was there something darker going on? As he walked into the store, a wave of mixed emotions washed over him. The bright lights, the familiar sounds of registers beeping, and the smell of fresh cleaning supplies, it all felt oddly different now that he wasn't the CEO. Jared felt like an outsider in his own business. He could sense that something wasn't quite right. The store looked fine on the surface, but he had learned over the years that appearances could be deceiving. Jared began to walk through the aisles, looking for signs of trouble. As he passed by various sections of the store, he tried to gauge how the staff interacted with customers. He noticed a few employees who seemed friendly, smiling and greeting people as they walked by. But there was something unsettling about the way a few of the employees were behaving. Some didn't make eye contact, while others appeared distracted, talking amongst themselves rather than helping customers. Jared's eyes narrowed as he continued his observations. He saw a few customers looking confused or frustrated, unsure of where to find the items they needed. And yet, the employees didn't offer any help. In fact, some of them seemed to be avoiding the customers entirely. Jared wondered if this was a case of bad training or something worse. Could these employees be ignoring customers on purpose? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Jared walked up to one of the customer service desks. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, so he decided to keep his questions simple. He needed to see how staff handled even the most routine interactions. But little did he know, the moment he walked up to the desk, his experience would take a sharp turn into something much more troubling. After walking around the store for a few minutes, Jared decided to head over to the customer service desk. He needed help finding a specific item in the store, and it seemed like the right place to start. He saw a young woman sitting behind the counter, a nail file in her hand. She was concentrating on her nails, carefully filing them in slow, methodical strokes. Jared approached the counter with a smile, hoping to engage her in a friendly conversation. "Excuse me," Jared said in his calm, polite voice. "Can you help me find the electronics section? I've been looking around for a while, and I can't seem to find it." At first, Tiffany, the young woman filing her nails, didn't look up. Jared repeated his request, but again, Tiffany didn't acknowledge him. She simply continued filing her nails as though Jared hadn't said anything at all. Jared's eyebrows furrowed, unsure of how to respond. Was she ignoring him on purpose? Or was she just distracted by what she was doing? "Excuse me." Jared tried again, this time raising his voice just a little to get her attention. "I really need some help with finding the electronics section. Can you assist me?" Finally, Tiffany glanced up at Jared. She didn't offer a greeting or even a smile. Her eyes briefly scanned him, but she didn't seem to recognize him as the CEO. Her response, however, left Jared speechless. "Try somewhere else," she muttered, her tone dismissive. Without even putting down her nail file, she turned her attention back to her nails, as if Jared didn't exist. Jared stood there for a moment, stunned by her coldness. He had expected better from his employees. At that point, He wasn't just upset, he was confused. Was this how she treated all customers? And why had she brushed him off so quickly? Jared glanced around the store, wondering if anyone else had noticed the interaction. A few people were walking by, but no one seemed to be paying much attention. Feeling both embarrassed and frustrated, Jared tried to shake off the awkward moment. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just a random incident. Something was wrong. Deciding to give it one last try, Jared walked over to a different part of the store, hoping to find another employee who might be more helpful. But as he walked away from Tiffany's desk, he couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was at play here. He knew he wasn't the only one who had ever been treated this way. Was Tiffany's behavior a one-off mistake, or was there a pattern of mistreatment toward customers like him? Jared continued his undercover mission, but now, his focus had shifted. He needed to understand if Tiffany's behavior was just an isolated incident, or if there was something much bigger happening behind the scenes at his company. The stakes had just gotten higher, and Jared was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Jared stood back, feeling a wave of frustration wash over him as he continued to watch Tiffany from a distance. He had already witnessed her rude dismissal, but now he needed to know if it was just an isolated incident, or if there was something more troubling happening in the store. Was it truly possible that she had ignored him because of his race? Jared was determined to find out. He continued to linger, pretending to browse through some nearby shelves, but his eyes were fixed on Tiffany behind the counter. He watched as another customer, this time a white man in a sharp suit, approached her desk. Immediately, Tiffany put her nail file down. Her posture straightened, and she greeted the man with a bright smile, almost as if she had been waiting for him. "How can I help you, sir?" she said, her tone suddenly warm and eager. She quickly helped him with his request, speaking in a way that was both friendly and efficient. Jared's stomach sank as he saw this clear contrast between how Tiffany treated him and how she treated the white customer. It was so stark, so obvious. While he had been ignored, this customer was treated with nothing but respect and attention. Jared's mind raced. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some minor slip-up. Tiffany was treating customers differently based on their race. It was the only explanation that made sense. Jared continued to watch, hoping he had somehow misread the situation. But as the hours passed, he saw the same pattern unfold over and over. Every time a white customer approached the counter, Tiffany was polite, attentive, and quick to offer help. She smiled, made eye contact, and even asked if they needed anything else. But when a black customer or someone of Asian descent came up, she barely acknowledged them. If she did engage, it was with a quick, uninterested answer or a shrug, as if they were inconveniencing her by asking for assistance. Jared felt a growing sense of disbelief and anger. How could this be happening in one of his stores? He had built his company on the promise of fairness, treating every customer with respect, no matter their background. And here was one of his own employees blatantly failing to uphold those values. But this wasn't just Tiffany. Jared couldn't help but notice the behavior of some of the other employees. He caught a glimpse of one of the store's security guards eyeing a group of black teenagers with suspicion, while a white shopper was given a warm greeting without hesitation. Another employee, a woman stocking shelves, glanced up at a Hispanic family and then quickly looked away, avoiding making eye contact. It was subtle, but the signs were all there. Jared knew that this kind of behavior was toxic. It wasn't just about Tiffany anymore. It was about the whole culture of the store, and possibly even the company. How many other employees were turning a blind eye to discrimination? How many customers were leaving the store feeling unwelcome or mistreated, never even realizing the truth of what had happened? Jared had to do something. The truth was clear now, and the sting of betrayal was sharp. He couldn't allow this behavior to continue in his company. He knew he had to act fast. The longer he stayed in the store, the more frustrated and disheartened he became. It was time for a confrontation, time for Tiffany to face the consequences of her actions. But Jared wasn't sure if he was prepared for what would happen next. His heart pounded as he walked toward the counter once again. Jared walked back toward the customer service desk, his mind made up. He had seen enough. Tiffany needed to know exactly who he was, and more importantly, she needed to understand the gravity of her actions. He had been treated with disdain, and now it was time for him to reveal the truth. As he approached the counter, Tiffany was once again engrossed in filing her nails, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit. Jared's heart was racing, but he remained calm. He wasn't just a regular customer anymore. He was the CEO, and this was his company. Tiffany needed to realize that her behavior had consequences, and he would make sure she understood. He took a deep breath and made sure to catch her attention as he stood before her. Jared didn't say anything at first. He simply removed his sunglasses, slowly. The moment Tiffany looked up, her eyes widened in recognition. The nail file slipped from her fingers, and she froze, her face draining of color. "Jared Lawson. You're the CEO?" she stammered, her voice shaky. Jared could hear the fear in her words. She hadn't expected this. He could see that clearly in her wide eyes and tense posture. Jared nodded, his gaze steady. "Yes, I am. And I've been watching you. Watching how you treat customers, especially people like me." His words were calm but firm, and there was no mistaking the weight they carried. Tiffany's hands trembled as she tried to collect her thoughts. Her eyes darted around, as if looking for a way out, but there was no escape. She had been caught. And Jared wasn't interested in hearing excuses. "Why did you ignore me?" Jared asked, his voice quiet but intense. "I came to you for help, and you treated me like I wasn't even there. But when that white customer came up, you were suddenly polite and eager to assist him. Why is that?" Tiffany opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. She seemed stunned by the directness of Jared's question, and the guilt on her face was clear. She fidgeted with her hands, unsure of how to respond. I didn't mean. I didn't think," she stuttered, her voice trailing off as the reality of her actions hit her. Jared's eyes never left hers. "It's not about me, Tiffany. It's about every customer who comes in here, expecting to be treated with respect. They deserve the same level of service, no matter what they look like. Your behavior affects them, and it reflects poorly on my company." Tiffany's face turned pale. She opened her mouth again, but no coherent words came out. She seemed overwhelmed with regret, but Jared knew this moment was not about her feelings. It was about accountability. "Your actions have consequences," Jared said, his voice softer now but still full of authority. "This isn't just about one customer or one mistake. It's about a bigger issue that I can't ignore. You've created an environment where some people feel unwelcome simply because of their skin color, and that's not something I'll tolerate in my company." Tiffany didn't say anything more. Her silence was enough. Jared turned and walked away, knowing that this was only the beginning. He would need to address this problem head-on, starting with Tiffany but extending to the entire store. The work was just getting started, but Jared was ready to take the next step in making things right. As soon as Jared walked away from Tiffany, the reality of what had just happened began to settle in across the store. Word spread like wildfire that the CEO himself had been there, witnessing the discrimination firsthand. The employees, who had been going about their work as usual, now whispered among themselves, casting nervous glances in every direction. They knew they were being watched, and the tension in the air was undeniable. Tiffany, who had been visibly shaken during her confrontation with Jared, now seemed even more uncomfortable. Her face had turned a deep shade of red, and she avoided making eye contact with the other employees, keeping her head down as she continued her tasks. It was clear that the truth had hit her hard. She wasn't just dealing with the embarrassment of being caught in the act. She was also facing the consequences of her actions. But Jared's mind wasn't solely focused on Tiffany. He had seen something far deeper, a culture of bias that had been allowed to thrive without anyone taking notice. Jared felt a knot form in his stomach as he watched the reactions of the other employees. The way they quickly shifted uncomfortably at his presence suggested they too had been complicit in some way, either by not recognizing the problem, or by failing to act when they saw something wrong. Discrimination wasn't just happening at the counter, it was built into the very fabric of the store's culture, something that had been overlooked for too long. Feeling a surge of frustration, Jared knew he couldn't let this moment pass without action. This wasn't just about one bad employee. It was about an entire system that had allowed racial bias to flourish. He couldn't let this situation slide. He had to act, and act fast, to fix what had gone wrong. Within hours, Jared called an emergency meeting with his management team. He needed to address what he had witnessed and take immediate steps to right the wrongs he had uncovered. When the team arrived, their faces were a mix of confusion, guilt, and concern. They had no idea what Jared had seen, but now they had to face it. "This isn't just about Tiffany," Jared began, his voice steady but firm. "I've been in this store, and I've seen how customers of color are treated. I've seen how some of you have let this happen. We cannot ignore this any longer. The values we've built this company on, fairness, equality, respect, are not being followed in our stores." The room was silent as Jared's words sank in. The managers had no choice but to face the truth. They had let a toxic culture of bias and favoritism slip through their fingers. It wasn't just one employee. It was an issue that ran much deeper. "We're not going to cover this up or pretend it's not happening," Jared continued. "This company is built on the idea of fairness, and we need to make sure that's reflected in every store, every interaction, and every decision we make. We are going to create real change starting today." Jared's words were a wake-up call for the entire management team. They could no longer stay passive in the face of this issue. They needed to take responsibility and ensure that their stores were places of equality for all. This was the moment for the company to reckon with its own shortcomings and commit to making things right. Jared's decision to address the discrimination head-on didn't just shake things up in the store. It sparked a company-wide shift. Instead of allowing this issue to be swept under the rug, Jared chose to use his position as CEO to create lasting change. He wasn't about to let this one incident define his company's future. Instead, he saw an opportunity to make his company better, to ensure that everyone, no matter their race, was treated equally. Jared wasted no time. He immediately rolled out a company-wide training program focused on diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism. Every employee, from the managers to the part-time staff, was required to attend. The training wasn't just a one-time event, it was an ongoing effort to help employees recognize their biases, understand how those biases affected others, and learn how to create a welcoming environment for everyone. Jared didn't want to simply fix Tiffany, he wanted to change the culture of his company for good. Tiffany herself was placed in mandatory sensitivity training. At first, she resisted. She felt embarrassed and defensive, unwilling to face the full extent of her actions. But over time, as she went through the training, Tiffany began to understand the impact of her behavior. She learned to acknowledge her biases and how to address them. Though the process was difficult, Tiffany started to see how her actions had hurt others and how much work she needed to do to change. But Jared didn't stop with training. He knew that creating real change meant reevaluating the company's hiring practices. He made it clear that diversity would be a key factor in selecting new employees. It wasn't just about hiring people of different backgrounds, it was about hiring people who would foster an inclusive environment, who understood the importance of treating everyone with respect, no matter their race. Managers were also held accountable. No longer could they turn a blind eye to the discriminatory behavior that was happening under their noses. They would be responsible for ensuring that every employee, from top to bottom, upheld the company's values of fairness and respect. Jared knew that without strong leadership at the top, nothing would truly change. The shift in company culture was noticeable almost immediately. Employees began to take the training seriously, and their attitudes toward customers started to change. They realized the importance of treating every customer with dignity and respect. It wasn't just about doing their jobs. It was about making sure that the values of fairness, equality, and respect were embodied in everything they did. Customers noticed the difference too. What had once been a store filled with subtle bias and discomfort had now become a place where people of all backgrounds felt welcome. The change wasn't instant, It took time and effort, but it was clear that Jared's decision to confront the issue had made a profound impact. As the months passed, Jared watched as the company transformed. It wasn't easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but the foundation had been set. The company was on its way to becoming a place where all customers were treated equally, no matter who they were or where they came from. Customers noticed the difference too. What had once been a store filled with subtle bias and discomfort had now become a place where people of all backgrounds felt welcome. The change wasn't instant. It took time and effort, but it was clear that Jared's decision to confront the issue had made a profound impact. As the months passed, Jared watched as the company transformed. It wasn't easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but the foundation had been set. The company was on its way to becoming a place where all customers were treated equally, no matter who they were or where they came from. For Jared, the most rewarding part was seeing how his leadership had made a difference. This wasn't just about fixing a problem, it was about creating a new chapter for his company, one built on fairness, respect, and a commitment to doing the right thing. Jared knew there was still much work to be done, but as he looked around at his employees, he felt hopeful. This was just the beginning of a better future for the company, and he was determined to make sure it stayed that way.